Every New Mexican deserves to understand how the law works for them, or why it doesn't work for them. Welcome to New Mexico Legal Lowdown, hosted by attorney Feliz Rael. Each episode, we will help demystify the legal system and uncover misconceptions through real conversations with New Mexico trial lawyers. Produced and powered by LawPods.
This episode is brought to you by the New Mexico Trial Lawyers Association Alliance for Justice. We want to thank our La Justicia Circle supporters, Singleton Schreiber, Nick Rowley, Lori Benko, Sherry LaCour, and McGinn, Montoya, Love, Curry, and Sievers, PA. Through their generous investments, they're safeguarding New Mexicans' right to access justice and a jury. And now, on to our conversation. Welcome to the New Mexico Legal Lowdown podcast. We are trial lawyers or plaintiff lawyers talking about the civil justice system in New Mexico. The laws in New Mexico may be different from the laws in other states. The purpose of the podcast is to provide general information and to demystify the civil legal process in New Mexico. This is not a substitute for appropriate legal advice in any individual case. Please contact a lawyer if you want to talk about your particular case. Today, I am very happy to welcome Ben Davis of Davis Keelan.
Good morning, Felice. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Excited to do this with you. This is fun.
Me too. I have wanted to do an episode on insurance bad faith for several months, and I asked several colleagues, who do you think would be a good guest? And multiple people recommended you, and I know you, so that was an easy choice. I can think of two other people who I think are also kind of experts in the field, but I get you today, and I'm super happy because you introduced me to a case that you've worked on along with another colleague, and I'm really interested to hear about it. But first, tell me what kind of law you do, and I'm particularly interested in when you first decided you wanted to be a lawyer.
Yeah. So, what kind of law I do is really highly focused on trial and litigation, right? And so, like a lot of lawyers in New Mexico, I'm very, very heavy into litigation, and like you suggested, one of the big areas we practice in is insurance bad faith. We represent policyholders, those who have been harmed by their insurance company because they didn't pay the claims, or perhaps there's all kinds of ways that can look. Oftentimes it's dealing with the payment of claims. It's the failure to defend. Sometimes they come, in the case that we may talk about a little bit later, it comes in the situation where the policyholder was, the insurance company failed to defend them after they were sued. That's a big part of the cases. Also do a lot of legal malpractice, which there's only a handful of us, that do that, and medical malpractice as well. And then, just finishing up a case that involved a commercial vehicle and, three lives lost. And, I've had lots of serious injury cases, lots of wrongful death cases, do a lot of that type of work and have for about 20 years. And I think we've known each other at least for probably 17 years, at least. And you were one of the first persons to reach out to me and when I broke away from the firm that you were formerly at. So yeah, we've known each
Lots
other
of bonding
for
there.
a long time. Yeah, exactly. Lots of interesting stories we share. But so why did I want to become a lawyer? I've thought about this question, and I wish I could. It's kind of two pieces. I'll say that it's two parts. And the first was I saw my parents. They had a small business, and I saw what bad lawyering can do. They had been harmed significantly their business had been harmed significantly by kind of a rogue actor, someone who was intent on stealing their business essentially and was successful at that. But they didn't, sit on their hands. They hired an attorney, and that attorney just did not do their job. And it was really, really bad. And I sit there, had a front row seat to watch what bad lawyering looks like and what effects, compound with bad lawyering. And that single incident, with several others, really has affected and shaped their lives to this day. And we're still dealing with it. So I think that was the first time I kind of got the idea I wanted to be a lawyer. Like a lot of us, I'm sure everyone has these stories. I had A baseball player was first. That didn't work out. Then an architect, and then I decided to be a lawyer. But it was really that particular instance which helped fuel my interest in it, and kind of seeing what lawyers can do. Oftentimes it's for the good, but when they screw up and when they do poorly, that's, it can affect a lot of people. That was really when I wanted to become a lawyer. And then the second part of the story is how did I want to become this type of lawyer where I help people rather than corporations? Because you and I both have represented very large self-insured corporations, large insurance companies. We did that for a few years. I was in that position for about 3 years, and I really was not super enamored with it. It just was not, it didn't fit my character, didn't fit my personality very well. Frankly, I was looking at like, well, maybe I'll go into do like software or something like that. I like techie stuff. It just wasn't fitting for me. And then I was headed to a hearing in Farmington. This was about 4 days after I learned that my wife was pregnant with our child. And it was, typical New Mexico, blue skies in Albuquerque. And as I head north to Farmington, this little car I had at the time, it just got really snowy, really bad, and keep going. Got to make the hearing in my mind. Kind of a young guy at the time, and the car, I lose control of the car, and I go right in front of this huge oil service truck, and wake up. I don't know how much longer later. If you ever take a look at the car, it's just destroyed, and I'll put it this way: I called a few days later to the tow truck driver. I'm like, "Oh, you have my car," and he's like, "You were in that car and you're alive?" It was that bad. He was shocked I was alive. And so I actually came out unscathed. It was pretty shocking. Some bumps and bruises and stuff like that, but really not that bad. And it was kind of like a crystallizing moment for me in my mind where I just really didn't want to die with with not doing what I loved, but also not, and having, a son who didn't know his dad. Oh, you protected big corporations, you protected insurance companies. That's not who I was, not who I wanted any kind of legacy to be. And so that really propelled me to, and I couldn't find a job in the plaintiffs world. So it just propelled me to start my own law firm. And that was, back in 2010. So we've still been going at it in 2026. So yeah.
That is wild. You and I think, opened our offices around the same time. And I remember going through something similar, just having a total crisis. Like I got, a decent paying job and at that same firm. And I remember thinking, I've got to figure something out. I've got to do something different. And when you're talking about, going to a hearing, and meanwhile, I'm worried about you not making it to the hearing and worried about what kind of thing those bosses would have said when you didn't show up at the hearing. I bet you got in trouble despite
No,
the
I
fact
have
that
to
you
say
were
they
in a
were
terrible
actually
accident.
they were very nice about it.
Oh, good.
They were great. They were actually very, very good.
Good.
Yeah, no. But of course, in my head, that's what you think at the time. You're like, you gotta get to the hearing. You can't miss court date. But yeah, but it's funny how those, and I don't want to say it's a little thing. It was actually a pretty big thing in my life. It's pretty life altering. But it's things like that that really can kind of like give you the impetus to kind of make some life changes, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, this is in my mind, I've gone through several iterations of my practice, but seems much more sustainable.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is, and it's hard. You and I both work with Kevin out of Portland, and it's like there is just so much that goes on to. It's so much bigger than I think a lot of us appreciate because, as my wife says, we're trained in the law, and we can get really good at that, but what we're not trained in is psychology or social work, because so many of our clients are dealing with some of the most difficult things in their lives, right? It is they've lost a husband, they've lost a mother, they've lost children. They're financially devastated from an insurance company not defending them or protecting them, right? Or simply, when a big storm comes through, not paying for their roof, and they've got to come out of pocket somehow with that, and it's not easy. So a lot of times I think we as lawyers, we want to do the law part, right? But we're dragged into a lot of the other part, which is, I would say, more important a lot of times, right, for our clients. But we're getting all of this type of very difficult information, very, helping people through really tough times in their lives. And so it's hard for us, I think, sometimes to turn that off when we go home. Or sometimes one of the things I do, which is not great, which is, I create barriers for myself where I can kind of compartmentalize stuff. but unfortunately, those compartments stay on when I'm at home, right? And so sometimes our folks at home need us too, and to be emotionally available for them. So it's an interesting job. It's not quite just the law or just writing briefs or just arguing in court. There's a lot more to it, and I wish we'd get better at law schools and other places to kind of help prepare us for that part of it too.
I agree. And some of our colleagues, I think that's one of the, I don't know if easy things, but the defense lawyers, I think you and I know one defense lawyer who's actually really good at her job because she is able to have that emotional connection with the people that she defends. And in her mind, she's defending individuals, not necessarily the corporation, or I don't know, but that's my perception of her.
No, and I always, as I always say, I think that was good training both you and I had was, and I'm sure you had the same experience. I represented certain individuals within an organization, right? And everyone deserves a defense. And the one thing I will always come out of this with in our civil world is everyone has rights, including the defendant, and we need to make sure they're protected as well, and that they are. We have to be thoughtful about the lawsuits we bring. We have to be thoughtful about the trials we move forward with. It all matters, and I think a lot of the public doesn't appreciate. For most good lawyers, and boy, are there some bad ones. I've sued them. But for most good lawyers, most of us kind of practicing at a higher level, yourself included in that, and many of our colleagues who are part of the New Mexico Trial Lawyers Association, we are thoughtful about who we sue. We are thoughtful about why we sue. We are thoughtful about the cases we bring. I mean, it's both for a business reason, right? Because most of us are on a contingency fee. We have to have cases that are going to be winners. And there's an ethical obligation, of course, as everyone knows. We can only bring cases that we have a good faith basis to bring. And we've looked at the evidence. But beyond that, I think, at least my position as a defense lawyer, I do think about the person you're suing. They are affected by it, right? And so, when you bring those cases, we need to be darn sure that that doctor's committed malpractice, that insurance company's engaged in bad faith, that lawyer committed malpractice, right? That trucking company was over hours and put a driver in a position where they're going to fall asleep. That's the kind of thing I see from our colleagues, and it's just a shame that some of the more reckless folks in our who have a law license, really speak the loudest sometimes, and they don't really speak for us, though. It's a shame.
Yeah, I was thinking about how one of them, I mean, listen, I'm not going to say I've never made mistakes
Oh,
because
sure, no, and that's not to say that any of us are perfect, and I was dealing with a mistake I made over the weekend. So, yeah, everyone makes mistakes. Absolutely.
but there's a learning curve, and it's the willingness to understand kind of what happened and what can be done. Just totally lost my train of thought. But the point that I was thinking of was that being a lawyer, the most important thing I've come to realize is that being a lawyer is a skill, not an identity. And it's really important because it's important, I think, like you said, the people who are practicing at a higher level, they realize that winning or losing is not a reflection of their value as a person. And I wish that more lawyers would realize that and realize that our commitment is to the fairness of the process, not to particular results. And ironically, somewhat, I feel like I could write a whole book about irony and paradoxes, but it's only when you get to that point that I think we're in a better position to make better decisions about the cases that we pursue, and that leads to more success in those cases. It's the divorcing of that egotistical thing that says, you've got to win, otherwise you're a horrible person.
Right. Yeah, no, I think it is it is funny because the more you get to that mindset of my job is to present the facts and represent my client and let the jury do their job, the better results you're going to have, I think. I just went to this fantastic seminar up in Oregon with Sari and Delamon, who you know as well, and on closing. And so much of it is a mindset of, I've certainly have done this in my closings before where, you're so riddled with anxiety and nervousness about the outcome that you want to rehash the whole trial for them, right? In your closing, or you want to control every aspect of the what they're going to get. And it's such a mind piece set that you really need to, what her kind of coaching on this is about is you need to let go. You've done your job, right? You need to let go. And it's now time for the jury to do their job. And once you can kind of get to that, it's really a really nice way to transition into that piece that you need to do as a lawyer, which is kind of let go of the case, let others decide it. We all have, I'd say all of us, but many of us are type A control people who like to control a lot of our, a lot of the stuff around us. And so it's hard. It's hard for me to do that. But when I can get there, boy, it makes a difference in the outcome. It really makes and what I mean by that is not winning or losing. What I mean is like you say, it's like, okay, I did the best job I could for this client. I presented the facts. It was a fair trial, and we got an outcome. And that's what our job was.
Yeah. I feel like a person is lucky if they get through life not having to deal with the legal system. And I think there's a significant number of people who do get through life without having to deal with the legal system. But I think many people have, at least in New Mexico, it would not be uncommon for a person to have a car accident. And so for most people, their interaction with the legal system is that, or maybe a relative, picked up some kind of criminal charge or something like that. It's
Sure.
usually through other people. So there's not a lot of deep understanding about how the process works. And that's part of the purpose of this podcast. We get insurance when we're driving. If you have a car, you have to have insurance. Sadly, a lot of people in New Mexico don't, even though it's the law. And if you happen to own a home, you have homeowners insurance. If you're a certain kind of professional, you have professional insurance. And I think there's just this idea that you pay every month or you pay a couple times a year, and then the insurance is just there and it'll take care of you if you're ever in a situation. But I appreciate what you do because it's a very narrow area of law, and people like me, we know something about insurance bad faith, but it's very much its own unique specialty. And they're just people in our community, our colleagues who we go to whenever those issues come up. Fortunately, I think issues come up less than 50% of the time. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think bad faith cases they're rare. I mean, if we're kind of looking at the scope of civil litigation, they are not something that happens all the time. I think some of our colleagues, and I wish this weren't the case, but some of our colleagues immediately think bad faith just because an insurance company maybe doesn't offer what they want for their motor vehicle crash, right? That's not bad faith. That's just part of negotiations, right? That being said, it is not uncommon to see. What I've seen is insurance companies trying to make money on claims. Okay. And let me kind of break that down a little bit and what I mean by that. First and foremost, you have to understand how an insurance company makes money. A lot of people think that an insurance company makes money because it accepts premiums, and those premiums are how it earns its money. That's not how it earns its money. An insurance company is a financial institution, really. And these are some of the biggest financial institutions in the world. AIG, for example. AIG came when we had the 2007, 2008, 2009 financial crisis. AIG came to President Obama at the time, or President-elect Obama, I believe, at the time, and George W. Bush as well, where, they were going to go under, just like some of the other major finance companies on Wall Street were about to go under as well. And President Obama, George W. Bush, all of their advisors quickly realized that AIG going down or going bankrupt would have been one of the worst financial impacts on our country to ever happen, because they are such a big company, such a massive financial bedrock of the United States. What happens is how an insurance company makes money is they take in those premiums that you pay as a policyholder, and this is obviously there's individual policyholders, there's companies, there's all types of policyholders. Lots and lots of businesses have different types of business coverage. I'm sure in your own little business, I know in my own little business, we've got all kinds of coverages through all kinds of different companies to protect us, right? And it's both a fiduciary obligation I owe to the firm, but also to my clients, that I want to make sure they're protected if I do screw up, because I can screw up. I'm human. This happens. And that's what I have it there for. It's for them, right? It's to protect me, but it's also to protect them. I'm a driver. And so I can, make mistakes and not pay attention or hit somebody or be negligent. And so I need to protect the other drivers on the road. That's why we have insurance. And so the insurance company takes those premiums, whatever they may be, they invest that money. They invest it in the stock market, they invest in the bond market, and they obtain a return on that money. And if you can kind of visualize this, imagine the premiums coming in and they invest that money, the insurance company invests that money, and then when claims are made, those same premiums go out the door. And what that's called is a loss ratio. And what that means, what we're looking at is when an insurance company pays out claims, it really should be they're paying out most of their premiums. Okay. Which is fascinating to people, because they're like, no, then how can they make money? Well, they're making money on the float, right? They're making money on the time they hold those premiums and invest them. That's the idea. What they don't make money on is claims. And what I mean by that is they shouldn't be trying to cut corners, pay less than is owed on claims that are being made by their policyholders. That is their service. That is what you paid for with your premium. And that is not where the insurance company makes money. The insurance company is not allowed to treat you differently than they would treat themselves, right? So there is a fiduciary obligation. It's a special relationship. It's very different than Home Depot, right? You're just a customer, okay? Home Depot gets to make money on you, and if they charge you a little bit more for their product, that's on you. You've got to go figure out a price that's less, okay? Their obligation is to their shareholders to make as much money as they possibly can. That's Home Depot's obligation, right? But with an insurance company, they have both obligations to their shareholders, but also to their policyholders. And that is the big difference between a typical corporation and an insurance company, is that there's a fiduciary obligation, just like you and I owe to our clients, just like a doctor owes to their patients. Insurance companies owe a fiduciary obligation. They have to put their interest at the same level as their policyholders' interest. And that's critical. That's really the difference when you're dealing with an insurance company versus any other type of corporation. Okay.
And when you encounter an insurance issue, let's say, so my understanding is that an insurance company, sometimes they just deny the claim, right? But they still hire a lawyer for their insured to defend the case. But sometimes they'll actually deny their own client a lawyer. Do you have a sense of the ratio of how often one happens versus the other?
Unfortunately, we do not have great stats on that. I wish we had better stats. There is lots of misinformation, I think, pushed by the insurance industry, by the Chamber of Commerce, that unfortunately, as folks who advocate for policyholders, folks who advocate for patients, clients, the general public, we're one of the few folks who do that. And there's really not any other industries that do that. So we don't have those good stats, I don't think. I wish the insurance companies could be an open book and provide all that information to us, but it's very hard to get. So I don't think there's any way to really quantify that. But there are those situations, So
but can I interrupt and ask?
Yeah.
What is the insurance? How does the insurance company deny a claim? Like, what do they say? What are some of the excuses that they come up with?
Sure, there's all kinds of. Listen. So if a person doesn't, let's start with the easy ones, right? The person doesn't pay their premium on time. Easy. Right, that's the claim should be denied. This is a contract, right? That's all a policy is a contract, and so you have to pay to get the benefits from the insurance company. Does that happen? Sure, that's a very good reason. But what often the cases I get involved in are very complex, dealing with specific policy language. For example, the case we're in the Court of Appeals on right now is the insurance company said, we received the information from your broker, but there was a special department that you should have sent this to. Okay. And there's a special magic language you should have used to tell us about the claim. Well, that's nonsense. It's just total nonsense. They had the information they needed to open the claim up, and they failed to do so. Okay. And they denied this physician a defense, and they denied him an indemnity. And of course, those are really the two key components to most liability policies, which is what we deal with oftentimes, is liability policies. And so the promise from an insurance company is pretty simple. You pay us premiums, we'll defend you, and we'll indemnify you. And indemnification is just a fancy word for we're going to pay claims, right? We're going to pay the claims out up to our limits. Okay.
Legitimate
It's
claims.
legitimate claims, right? And of course, that is a process. And some policies, professional policies, generally have provisions in there where the professional lawyers, doctors, engineers, folks like that, they have a say in whether or not the claim will be paid and how much. Motor vehicle policies generally do not have that same provision. The insurance company makes those decisions on their own of how much to pay, if at all, whether to take it to trial. But ultimately, an insurance company has an obligation to pay out that indemnity up to the limits when it becomes reasonable for an insurance carrier, a reasonable insurance carrier to understand that this is the type of claim that should be paid, and you can potentially get an excess judgment against your policyholder. So imagine this situation. Let's take a motor vehicle policy where a person buys minimum limits $25,000. And for all your listeners, I hope they have more than that. And I hope they can buy as much as they can afford. And we can talk about and some other stuff here in a little bit. But you want to have more than $25,000 because, frankly, I am not aware of any claim. There are just very few claims that go for less than $25,000 these days. I mean, some small fender bender stuff for sure. But it's just inflation, all the rest. Those limits have been in place since the 70s, I think, or the 80s. So it is very low. But let's say you have a claim where they only have $25,000, and as a result of some negligence, someone was killed.
Yeah.
They didn't pay attention.
It happens.
It happens. And that's a situation where the insurance company needs to immediately write a check for the policy limits. No questions asked. Get it done. If they don't, and they put their interest ahead of their insured's, right? Because they want to hold on to that money a little longer so they can keep it invested. Or they are an insurance company that really doesn't, do a good job at claims handling where they get these serious claims paid immediately. What can happen is you, as the policyholder, as the now defendant in a lawsuit, can get hit with a judgment many times that $25,000. $10 million for a loss of a person, $20 million. That is very possible and very likely. So what happens in that case is the policyholder will then assign their rights against their insurance company to the plaintiff, whomever was harmed, so they can pursue the case against the insurance company. Okay?
We want to take a quick moment to thank our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by the New Mexico Trial Lawyers Association Alliance for Justice. We want to thank our Adobe Pillar supporters, Fadul, Clough, Hardy, and Conaway, LLC, Poulos and Coates, and Tani, Acosta, and Chaparro, PC. Through their generous investments, they're safeguarding New Mexicans' right to access justice and a jury. Now, back to our conversation. And so my understanding, tell me if this is wrong, but when, I have a case and we're negotiating and the defense lawyer, their loyalty is supposed to be to the client, but they're paid by the insurance company. So it's can be an uncomfortable situation. But I have historically told clients when we're negotiating, it's important for us to make or offer to settle the case within that policy limit. And tell me the significance of that.
Sure. So that triggers all of those duties we just spoke about. So for example, let's use our motor vehicle accident case again, where someone only has $25,000 and the family that's been harmed, they refuse to accept the $25,000. Understandably so. It's not enough to cover the loss of a life ever. But if the person who hit you has $25,000 and no assets, no other money,
right,
which is very common, right? If you have that low amount of insurance, they're not going to have a lot of assets. There's been exceptions to that rule, but very unlikely. So if you do your asset search and you see they don't have anything, the reason you want to make an offer within that $25,000 or at $25,000 is because as soon as you do, that triggers the clock for the insurance company, right? They've got a certain amount of time to pay you, a reasonable amount of time based on the circumstances. And if they don't, then you're going to take them to trial and go get a $10, $20, $30 million verdict against the driver and take that assignment. right? That's what will happen. But you need to trigger those duties. If you don't, if you stay above that $25,000, you'll never trigger the insurance obligation, because what's the insurance company going to do? Here's $25,000. You won't take it. They still have to defend the person and go to trial. That's what they're going to have to do.
Yeah, yeah. If it makes sense, right? The person isn't driving a luxury vehicle and it doesn't, and it's not like they've got 3 homes or something. There are times when that 25,000 isn't enough, but it makes sense to say, okay, yes, we'll take it. And then if the insurance company agrees, that's the end of the case. That's
That's the
just
end of
the
the
end of
case.
it.
And
But
it's
if they
awful. Yeah.
don't agree, and you go to trial and you get a heck of a lot more, then does the insurance company ultimately have to pay that amount?
That's right. And that's part of the assignment. And that's part of why we have all of these rules, I would say, in New Mexico and every state in the country, frankly, a body of law called bad faith. And that is really what we do a lot of at my firm, which is, prosecute insurance companies for their failure to treat their insured on the same level as themselves, right? It's failure to, and there's also all types of other violations like Unfair Insurance Practices Act, the UPA, the Unfair Practices Act, violations where they may, for example, misrepresent to their insured their policy coverages, right? Those are the types of things that we see where these insurance companies, they use words to try to get the insured to go away, to get the policyholder to go away, tell them they don't have coverage for XYZ. Well, that wasn't accurate. That's not true at all. And so an insurance company has to be very careful with their words, which is important, right? Because they're telling people what their rights are, much like a lawyer does. And so they have to be careful with their words, and they are the trained professionals, the claims professionals in this world, and they know what these policies say. They know how the policies are used. They know how to find coverage, and that's really their job, is to find coverage for their policyholders.
Yeah, one of the things you said earlier was the insurance company has to put their interest at the same level as their client's interest, the insured's interest. A different way of saying that maybe is that they can't put their own interests above the
That's right.
policyholder's interests.
That's right. It's just the same as a lawyer, same as a doctor, is you cannot as a lawyer put your interests in money or whatever ahead of the interest of your client. And same thing with an insurance company. The insurance company can't put their interests in not paying the claim, their interest in earning money on the premiums, their interest in simply sweeping this claim under the rug ahead of their policyholders' interest, which is protection and payment of claim. That's what they purchase. And so what we say is, hey, you're not Home Depot, you're not ExxonMobil. Your obligation is not just to yourself. You don't get to be selfish in this process. You have to treat your policyholder like you would a lawyer, like a lawyer has to treat their client, like a doctor has to treat their patient. Frankly, kind of like a mother has to treat their child. You need to be there for your policyholder, because if you're not, the law is going to impose some harsh sanctions against you, insurance company, including punitive damages, because punitive damages are really the only way an insurance company will listen. That money is the only thing that helps them understand they need to change what they've done and how they do it going forward.
Because otherwise, they benefit just by delay. Just delaying the payment of, let's call it $1 million. I mean, that's a lot of interest. And
It's a lot of
sometimes
interest.
even just delaying the payment. And for sure, lawsuits and cases take a while. It's appropriate to take a while to develop the facts, to learn things and gather information and consult with experts and so forth. But at some point, that delay seems like a violation because the judge also has the discretion to impose prejudgment interest.
Correct.
And in many circumstances, the judge also imposes post-judgment interest. So it's possible that even after a verdict, there's an incentive by the insurance company to delay. And that might be an example of them putting their own interest ahead of the other people who have rights.
Delay is the classic. It's the
Yeah.
classic, right? Because it goes right back to, how does an insurance company make money?
Yeah.
The longer they keep the money in the company, the more money they can make, right? It's just that simple. And so an insurance company has an obligation to investigate the claim, right, and deal fairly with their policyholder. And they need, so there is a period of time where they do need to do an investigation to see what the liabilities are, right? To see if their policyholder is liable, to see what the damages are. All of that is part of a fair investigation that an insurance company is required to do. But when we see problems is when like our $25,000 case where they did their investigation, it's absolutely clear that they should pay the policy and they don't. That's when the insurance company is engaging in bad faith because they get a reasonable amount of time to do a fair investigation. Okay. And every case is different. I think you've alluded to that. Some cases take a longer time to develop, a longer time for everyone to have an understanding of what the case is going to look like because, it's fact intensive. A lot of our cases are, and it's not obvious from the get-go. And so you need time to develop the case, and the insurance company needs time to see what the case is going to look like. That's fair. But what's not fair is when it becomes reasonably clear to the insurance company that they should pay the indemnity. Then that investigation starts with the initial claim and the defense. And that's a huge part of it. Is the duty to defend is even larger than it's more expansive in New Mexico as well as many other states for an insurance company. And so what I mean by that is when an insurance company receives a claim, they really have three options. And this is coming from our courts of appeals and Supreme Court, is they have options to defend the claim fully without what's called a reservation of rights letter. Okay. They say, your policy's paid up, you hit another vehicle. This is a case where we have to defend you without a reservation of rights letter. Okay. There's nothing outside of coverage that we can claim you're not covered for. All right. Second option is they defend with a reservation of rights letter. What is that? The reservation of rights letter is, it says to the insured, the policyholder, we reviewed the lawsuit against you, we reviewed the claim, and under the terms of our policy, there are certain items within the lawsuit or within the claim that fall outside of coverage. All right. So for the classic example is punitive damages in a motor vehicle case, although there's a pretty good argument those should be covered, but we're not there quite yet. But oftentimes an insurance company will say, we don't cover punitive damages, and you purchase that policy, and so those aren't covered. And so they'll put it to a letter and say, hey, we'll cover you for what we've agreed to cover you for, but not for punitive damages. And here's the language, right? So that's option two. Another option is simply deny the claim and don't defend it. And that is when insurance companies can get in real trouble, because what our courts have said is the duty to defend, it's so important right then at that moment that we really want you to defend insurance companies, unless it's from your investigation. It's just so apparent and clear. The classic example is what I just told you. You didn't pay your premium. We haven't been your insurance company for 2 years. You've got the wrong insurance company. Those are the types of things where, sure, insurance company deny the claim. That makes sense. Very clear. There's no reasonable basis for there to be coverage. But oftentimes, and particularly in these professional policies, particularly in more sophisticated types of claims, they're on notice that there is the potentiality, is what the courts call it, the potential for coverage. And when you have potential for coverage, you've got to defend. And if you don't defend, then the insurance company has lost all of its rights under the policy, and essentially they are liable for any judgment entered against the policyholder, as well as punitive damages. And it's not that the insurance companies don't have rights. We're not taking any rights away from the insurance company. What we're saying, insurance company, is defend your policyholder because there's a potentiality for coverage. But at the same time, file what's called a declaratory judgment action, a counterclaim against your insured, and have the courts decide if there's coverage or not. What we don't want is the insurance company making unilateral decisions on behalf of their policyholders, saying, policyholder, we know best. We don't think there's coverage, so there's no coverage. Well, we have a system set up in place. That's why we're one of the greatest countries in the world, is this system where we have judges that make fair decisions based on the facts before them and the law before them. And so an insurance company could go to the judge and say, we don't think there's coverage for this reason, this reason, this reason. The policyholder gets to respond and say, no, there is coverage for this reason, this reason, this reason. and the judge makes a decision. And once that judge makes the decision and says the insurance company's right, insurance company's out of the case. They don't have to defend any longer. They don't have to indemnify. There's no coverage. And that's the fair way to do it. But what we can't have is insurance companies from an office in Chicago or New York or California saying to a New Mexican, hey, there's no coverage here and tough. Sorry. Good luck.
Yeah. Or we'll wait and see how things shake out.
Yeah, that's right. Or we'll wait and see how things shake out. And what's always, I don't know, funny is maybe the wrong word, but interesting to me is, we get these assignments of these cases and the insurance company is like, well, wait a minute, we did nothing wrong. We didn't have to go do that. We shouldn't have been required to go to the court to say that, but it's clear as day and it's been the law forever in New Mexico. And they absolutely act like they don't know what they're supposed to do. But every insurance company that's operating in New Mexico is required to understand our law and required to understand how to fairly adjust claims and fairly defend claims under our laws. And that's what they're supposed to do. And our laws are not any different than anywhere else. We're on par with every other state in the country.
Before we decided to record this podcast, we spent a little bit of time talking about this case. And at this point, it's probably appropriate for us to give a shout out to your colleague, Molly McGraw, who was your co-counsel on this case. But one of the things that I found so interesting about this case that you filed against several insurance companies in 2016. And the most fascinating thing is who you were representing.
Yeah.
So tell us about that. I want to hear.
Let me give you a little backstory. So Molly McGraw and I joined forces. We had two different patients. And then my law partner, Zachary Keeland, as well. We had two different patients, but what happened was, this actually goes back to 2013, Felice.
Wow.
So 2013, we filed two different medical malpractice cases for two different patients against a physician named Dr. Jane. Dr. Jane was alleged by the New Mexico Medical Board to have killed 17 patients through overprescription of opioids. The feds later got involved and identified upwards of 100 patients that he killed as a result of overprescription of opioids. And so we filed suit. Dr. Jane submitted the lawsuit to his insurance company, and they denied him a defense for both claims. Dr. Jane ultimately had to file for bankruptcy. We had to chase him through bankruptcy court. And finally, after a number of years, we obtained what's called an assignment. That's what I was speaking about earlier. So Dr. Jane said, listen, you have a valid lawsuit against me. I've damaged your clients. But I've also been damaged by my insurance company refusing to defend me, refusing to indemnify me, refusing to meet the obligations of their contract or the policy. So what happens is he assigns his rights through just a document, a contract. He says, every lawsuit I have against my insurance company or my broker, I'm giving to you, patient. And in return, patient, you will not seek any additional damages against me, and I can go on with my life, which happened to be in prison at that point. But that's what happened. And so we took those cases, and so we stood in the shoes of Dr. Jane, right? The person we had sued. It's kind of a unique thing, as well as the trustee of the bankruptcy court, because the trustee actually takes over those claims when you file for bankruptcy. So the trustee ended up assigning his claims as well. So it's interesting, these weird machinations that you get into with bad faith law, but that's what happened. And so then we filed in 2016 our bad faith case against the doctor's company. Well, Pulic is what the name of the company is, the subsidiary of the doctor's company. And
what did they say? Litigation makes unlikely friends.
That's right. Yes, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Friends may be a strong word, but certainly we were
an alignment of interest.
We are aligned and pursuing the same goal, which was to go after this insurance company that frankly did Dr. Jane wrong. And the reason I say that is what happened is these are what are called claims made policies. So every professional listening to this has most likely a claims made policy. And claims made policy differs from an occurrence policy, okay? Your motor vehicle policy is if you hit somebody and you're negligent today and you've got a policy in place, but you decide to cancel your insurance 2 weeks from now for whatever reason, the insurance you had in place on this date is going to be the insurance company that covers the claim. Okay. My policy for legal malpractice, an engineer's policy, a doctor's policy is usually, not always, are what are called claims made policies, meaning if I get notice of a claim where, hey, client's upset with me, they say, I'm going to sue you for $1 million, I have to provide that notice to my current insurance company. If I don't, and I renew later on, they will not cover my claim. All right.
I've
So
seen lots of people, defendants, small healthcare companies who, whatever, for whatever reason, they're just not sophisticated or they feel embarrassed and they delay reporting claims to their insurance company. And it's the wrong thing to do.
it's the wrong thing to do. And full disclosure, I've reported claims. I've never been sued for legal malpractice, but I've reported a claim which I thought for whatever reason I didn't think the client had a legitimate claim. That didn't matter, right?
Yeah.
I know I actually hadn't done anything wrong, but I reported it because why
Communication
not?
is key.
Communication's key. Let's keep myself. I didn't raise my rates. There was no problem, and no lawsuit ever came out of it because it really wasn't a claim. But you just want to make sure you protect yourself. But in this case, what happened is Dr. Jane's insurance broker, the person who sold him the policy, saw Dr. Jane on the news when he was accused of killing 17 people by the New Mexico Medical Board. And so his broker immediately went and found the charges by the medical board and took them, submitted them to Pulick, the doctor's company subsidiary, and said, hey, our physician has been accused of killing 17 people. One of those was my client, Sabrina Clark. One of those was Molly's client.
And
And
that was, it was absolutely the right thing for the insurance broker to do.
100%, they did what they should have done. I will say we did bring a kind of a somewhat of a claim against the broker because they didn't fill out the proper paperwork, I would say, when
Sure.
that's what the insurance company was relying on.
Yep.
But they did the right thing. And really their concern, the broker's concern at that point was more, he's lost his medical license. Can he be insured under your company? And the answer is no. But he still was insured and the claim was made. And so therefore he was protected under that policy if he got sued a year later or 2 years later or 3 years later or 4 years later. Okay. And that's what happened. He got sued a year later and they didn't protect him. Pulick said, nope, no defense, no indemnity. We're not going to protect you. You didn't file the claim with the appropriate department, okay, with the right form. And it wasn't you who did it, your broker did it. But our courts have said no. Notice is notice. You do not, insurance company, you do not get to hide behind some hyper technical rules that you've placed in your policy. If you have notice, you have notice. Be reasonable. That's what
Yeah.
our courts say for a very good reason, because we don't want people to pay insurance premium year after year after year and then be excluded on some hyper technicality that the insurance company created, which was not necessary.
For the purpose of avoiding payment of claims.
For the purpose of avoiding payment of claims, right? Because and again, this is when I kind of started off with this conversation was insurance companies don't make money on claims. They should never have any type of policies, procedures, culture. A lot of this is culture that where the claims department is a profit center for the insurance
Yeah.
company. That's not a profit center. They're a service center. They're servicing their policy holders, right?
And if
That's
we look
their only
backwards in
job.
time, I mean, it's sort of silly and it's hard to understand because that insurance company, had they just accepted responsibility and done their duty, they could have, I'm guessing that that policy maybe had a $1 million limit, right?
Correct. They would
And
have paid the $1 million.
pay the $1 million
That would have been the end of
in
the
a
day.
timely manner, could
Yep.
have saved a multi-million dollar claim down the road.
Correct. Yeah. Ultimately, the jury found that they were responsible for $52 million because of what, the bad faith. And the jury really wanted to stop this type of behavior from going forward. And that's what they were saying, is that looking at what happened here, the insurance company should think twice and 3 times and 4 times before they ever do this to another physician. That is really what they were saying,
Yeah.
because those are the types of numbers that help an insurance company get it. Without those types of numbers, they'll never get it. They just won't. Had this been $1 million jury verdict, they won't change anything.
Yeah.
Even a $10 million jury verdict won't change a thing. It needed to be.
Because I'm assuming that for you and for the plaintiffs in the underlying case, if you all, said, hey, listen, this is only $1 million policy, they're offering it, the odds of, I mean, there were some interesting discussions, and I think there's a lot of misinformation. For example, because of some really idiotic commercials and rumors, I have the impression that a lot of doctors believe that plaintiffs can basically take their houses. And that's just not the New Mexico law. Homes are protected, retirement accounts are protected. I mean, so many things are protected. But it's just, I mean, I think plaintiff lawyers have an incentive to sit down with their client and say, you're not going to get their house, you're not going to get their their kids' college fund, you're not going to get their retirement. They have $1 million policy. That is not going to make up for the bad things that happened, but that is realistically all we can get, and they are offering it. And I think most plaintiffs would be crazy not to say okay.
No, no. I mean, there is a vast amount of forces outside of New Mexico that are suggesting to physicians here who work that you and I and all of us trial lawyers are going to take a physician's house. We're going to take their livelihood. We're going to take their 401k. That couldn't be further from the truth. I am personally not aware of any situation other than when the insurance company did not protect their insured, did that happen.
Yeah.
Okay, Dr.
Yeah.
Jane in that case had to pay us some money from his properties. That was absolutely correct because the insurance company failed to protect him.
Yeah.
And that's really who we're looking at as these
And at that
insurance
point, we're
companies.
talking about vacation homes. We're not talking about primary residence.
No, but I've never had a situation. I can't think of a single colleague who's had a situation where we've taken a home, where we've,
I'm not aware of any situation like that either.
because you have the $1 million policy. I'm absolutely going to tell my clients, their families, your loved one was worth more than that. I wish they had more insurance, but this is not a fight we're going to be able to succeed at because New Mexico law protects a lot of the assets for the physician.
Yeah.
And for good reason, right?
Sure.
Same thing for lawyers. I mean, we get sued too. And
Right.
we have to think about our assets and have enough insurance to protect ourselves and protect our clients. And that's really what it's about, is that it's about protecting the patient, protecting the client. And, the decisions about how much coverage to get, that's all, financial decision as well as, a risk tolerance decision. But we're not coming after houses. That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
What I am going to do is come after your insurance company if they don't protect you.
Right.
I'm absolutely going to do that. And you and the physician and I are going to have a very serious conversation about that with their lawyer about how do we make sure that insurance company never does what they did to that doctor ever again.
Yeah. That's incredible. And that case is on appeal right now. So
It is.
your clients, I mean, have started a legal process in 2013, and they did get a judgment, but there's an appeal. So that's ongoing, and they still have not seen a dime.
Yeah. So they lost their mother in all the way back in 2010.
Oh
I
my
watched those
gosh.
kids grow up. They're adults now. So
Wow.
yeah, they were babies when this all happened. And so because this physician overprescribed opioids very much in violation of the standard of care, and she was not the only victim.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, I feel like we could probably talk for a whole other hour about this, but we're running out of time, and I actually have a hearing coming up. But I didn't want to let you get away without asking the final question, which is, what is your favorite New Mexico day trip or your favorite New Mexico meal?
Oh, so that's a good one. I've been thinking about. I've got two favorite day trips. So you're gonna get both of them. I'm sorry.
No,
So
good.
yeah. I think it depends on the day, but one of my favorite day trips is just to go to that, and you're gonna get restaurants as well because there's always food involved. Is to go to the Jemez and eat a Los Ojos. Right?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's just one of those great trips. There's this beautiful waterfall, and you probably hiked to it before, and you go hang out, swim, jump in. It's really cool.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, I love that day trip. And then Madrid, however you want to say it, is fantastic. And of course, going to eat over there, seeing a band, that's so much fun. So those are my two.
What do you order?
Oh, it's usually enchiladas, red enchiladas with red. Yeah. Yeah, green
Excellent.
chili for my burgers, but red for my enchiladas. So
Have you ever been to the Lights of Gisewa at I don't know if
Now,
I pronounce that correctly, but over in it's usually the first full moon in December at Jemez at the
I have
ruins.
been. Yes, yes,
Oh,
yes. It is magical.
it's
It
one of the
is.
most incredible things to see in New Mexico.
I couldn't agree more. It is so cool to hang out, have some hot chocolate, like walk through the ruins in this beautiful setting. It's it's something that I don't know. I don't think you can recapture that anywhere else in the world.
It's and they're dancing, there's dancing. I mean, it gets a little crowded, so,
Yes,
a person has to be prepared. They have timed entries, but consistently it is one of the things, and if I've got people from out of town, I it is one of the most impressive, beautiful things to see in New Mexico. And
it
of course,
is.
Jemez in general is just gorgeous.
And I'll give you one more. Full
Okay.
moon via Calderas, snowshoes or cross country ski. It's got all that snow out there, and you drive, and you're in the middle of the Calderas, and it's
Yeah.
unbelievable. And they have bonfires set up, and you can hike to or ski to. It is super cool. Yeah,
I
they do
probably
the
would
national
not
forest.
go in the absence of a bonfire, but I might with a bonfire.
Yep, several bonfires. You hike to them, so you get a sweat, and then yeah, that's super cool. It's
That is
gorgeous.
so great. Ben, thank you so much. Did I
Yeah.
did I capture everything? Any last point that you wanted to make?
Oh, I can go on and on for about this stuff so long,
We
and
might be able we might have to schedule another one, but we'll
no,
spare our
I really
listeners this
appreciate
time.
it, and I think it was a great conversation.
We'll
Yeah,
keep our listeners coming back,
there we go.
hopefully.
Thanks, Felice.
All right, Ben, take care.
You too. Bye.
Bye. Before we wrap up, we want to thank our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by the New Mexico Trial Lawyers Association Alliance for Justice. We want to thank our Chili Circle supporters, the Tracy Law Firm, and Curtis and Company. Through their generous investments, they're safeguarding New Mexicans' right to access justice and a jury.
Thanks for joining us on New Mexico Legal Lowdown. If today's conversation changed how you see the legal system, share it with a friend. We'll be back next time with another trial lawyer fighting for New Mexicans. Produced and powered by LawPods.